Well, in the J Sports, Detroit Red Wings, obviously we had some big breaking news yesterday. Steve Yzerman just spoke to the media. My reaction to the press conference, I thought it was interesting because, when you talk about Steve Yzerman, he usually is very he's nonchalant. He's not going to tell you everything he needs to know. Sometimes he's going to be like, "Look, I would like to tell you more, but you just can't. You just can't." Um, but Steve Eisen made it clear his expectation this season is to be competing for a wild card spot, and he feels the team has the talent to do so. I think, in between, he's feeling like this is a little bit taking a little bit too long in the rebuild portion. I think we're all aware of that it is taking too long in the rebuild portion. But what I will say is, I liked his line about not trading for players because you have to give good players to get good players, which I totally understand. But he also said, I don't want to make not getting a number two or number three draft pick as an excuse for not drafting what we are trying to do, because there are other ways to get it done. He was all over the place, and Yzerman said he understands and respects the fan base and the opinions of those who think the Detroit Red Wings rebuild is taking too long, and that they are trying to make the right decisions to do so, and do things as quickly as he can, while acknowledging that this is a non-linear process. He says, we are going to continue to do everything that we can possibly can to build a team that can compete for a Stanley Cup, and I'm hoping to expedite the process any way we can. So that right there, Steve Yzerman acknowledged that this rebuild is taking a little bit too long, and it's coming straight from the horse's mouth. I think everybody has been critical of how long it's been able to take. In hockey, it's not a linear process, like he just said. It's kind of like a up and down kind of, it's like a bar graph. And I think that the right move to be made was getting rid of Coach Malone. I feel like, he said he made this decision around the Toronto Maple Leafs game, and then it took some time to get it done. And obviously that they had the roster freeze and all that jazz, and they had to they had to work out a buyout situation with LA Kings. But it felt like, Steve Yzerman had his mindset. And even though what happened with the Blues, like, cool, I think he already had his mindset there too. And, you know, I felt like Coach Malone, I felt like this team woefully underperformed under his stewardship. I felt like they could be a lot more aggressive. I feel like they're wasting the prime of Dylan Larkin, because, as you can see, he's having 3 elite years in a row and no playoffs to show for it so far. But even this is a screen grab of the St. Louis Blues game. This is what we've been seeing all the time with this team. It hasn't been just a one-time thing. It's been a two-time thing. It's been a three-time thing. We see it over and over again. I read messages from the fans that are saying, like, look, this is pissing me off that we're in this situation that we're in. The Detroit Red Wings is like, look, I think we all expected it to be a slower process. I think the realistic people thought, look, it's going to be a slower process. I did not think they would take a step back like they have. And that's on Coach alone. Obviously, when you're in the bottom of the East right now in terms of points, and you're seventh out of eight teams in the division, I mean, you're 3 games away from making a run at the fifth seed, which is going to be the wild card. But all in all, like, this Detroit Red Wings team is playing pretty. They're not playing up to anyone's standards, including Steve Yzerman's, and that's why he had to make the change. And my reaction totally is like, look, this is a team that is struggling to be aggressive in the right mindset. And I thought, watching Derek Lone in the same stale coaching style, I thought it was just ridiculous to watch over and over and over and over again. And, a lot of people talk about Todd McLellan, and they talk about, why is Todd McLellan a good choice for the Detroit Red Wings? And I'll give you a reason why he's a good choice. The first thing about Todd McLellan is, when he went to San Jose, they were on their last leg. Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, the team was kind of older, and they were going to have to rebuild pretty soon. They had some, runway, but it wasn't much. Same with the LA Kings. They were I think they were in the midst of a rebuild, from the years when they won the Stanley Cup. So they were good, but they weren't as good as they could be. Obviously they had to rebuild a little bit and retool on the fly. They still got Kopitar and Doughty and everything like that, but they were still a team that was kind of like woefully not acceptable for LA Kings hockey. And then he went to Edmonton, and obviously Edmonton, they were a team that even up until last year, they were a team that was woefully disappointing, woefully bad defensively. There was no goaltending to speak of. So that's it's like a nonchalant, like I feel bad for him to be going in that situation because, yeah, you have Connor McDavid and you have Leon Draisaitl and all that stuff. But when you have no defense, when you have no goaltending, you're kind of stuck in the middle. I could say here what Todd McLellan's taken over with the Detroit Red Wings with Seider and Edvinsson. That's way better than anything that he's at Edmonton or San Jose. I mean, San Jose had Brett Burns at that time, but even then, it's still it is what it is. I mean, that was a good team, but they were on the last leg. They were literally on the last leg of that franchise. They were going to have to rebuild. And then LA, obviously, with Drew Doughty, they didn't have the goaltending that they wanted. I think Anze Kopitar was in and out of the lineup a bunch. They were missing players. They were trading players away. Like it was just a total disaster in LA. That they made it playoffs a couple times, but they didn't really do much because look, they weren't a team that was going to be winning a Stanley Cup, especially with the way that they paid some of the players and everything. So, what to expect moving forward? Obviously, what I'm expecting moving forward is a better organized team. I think you could look at this Detroit Red Wings team and you could say two things. One, they can't get much worse. And then the second thing is you can't get much worse on the PK. Like you literally can't. When you look at the PK, it's 31st in the NHL. Okay? They're not scoring. They're 29th in the NHL. So if you can get just a tick up on the penalty kill and just a tick up on the goal scoring, maybe you can compete for a playoff spot. Because as we can see, no one's running away with this thing. Like no one's running away. Like Stevie said, a couple games, you go on a 3-game winning streak, and you're right there. You're right at the playoff picture. So this is what this is going to come down to. I feel like the bottom of the Eastern Conference is either bad, not talented, or whatever the case may be. Like these teams are struggling. Ottawa, Buffalo, Columbus, all these teams, and they have talent. They're just not as good as the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Detroit Red Wings moving forward. Obviously, if you are a Detroit Red Wings fan, you're going to watch with bated breath tonight when they play the Toronto Maple Leafs. But they got 3 games at home. It's kind of a good runway to get Todd's system up and running. You're going to be at home. You're going to have the first change. So if I'm the Red Wings and I'm reacting to the press conference as I am, you look at the press conference and you go, Steve Yzerman admitted it's taken too long. Steve Yzerman admitted there could be things that could be done, and he's trying to do it in the most responsible way. And I understand that from a realistic standpoint because you really can't be unrealistic with what you're trying to do. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this Detroit Red Wings team moving forward. It'll be interesting to see what happens the next 3 games. And it'll be interesting to see what happens for the rest of the season because I can tell you right now, you can't get much worse than what Derek Lalonde was doing. And that team looked woefully frustrated. That team looked woefully just disgusting to watch. And if we're going to be totally honest with ourselves, this move could have been made in November. I went on the podcast earlier a couple weeks ago, and I talked about how he had a 353 winning percentage in November, and he had a 410 winning percentage in December. And I feel like anytime you have your coach and you have 2 losing months of hockey, you're probably going to be a fired coach because you can't have 2 bad months in a season. And we saw it with Derek Lalonde. We saw it with this Red Wings team. They would the last 2 months, especially November and December, woefully unacceptable. It was woefully unacceptable last year, and it was woefully unacceptable in the first year, and nothing ever changed from that point. So, look, the Red Wings have everything in front of them. The Red Wings have talent. I think there's a lot of talent that has been, I don't know how you say it has been underused, hasn't been used like it should. And I think that, Coach McLellan is going to try to get the most out of it. And like I said, You can't get much worse than the penalty kill being at where it's at in 31st in NHL. And you can't get much worse than being one of the lowest scoring teams in the NHL. I think they're going to be more aggressive. I think they're going to be, pushing the pace, and that's exactly what they should do because this team don't have the defense to, make the plays necessary to win a hockey game defensively. They got to go win the game scoring goals. And when you're not scoring goals and you have 2.6 goals per game and you're 29th in the NHL, you can expect to be at the bottom of the NHL. And I think that's what McLennan's going to look at. I think, this team's going to be more aggressive offensively. And when you can't score goals, this is where you are. This is where you are. And I felt like the system that Derek Lalonde was preaching wasn't up to the standard of what Detroit could be. I thought, with the talent level that they have in Detroit, I thought they could be a lot better. Unfortunately for Derek Lalonde, he could never put this 2 and 2 together, and that's why he's fired. So Steve Yzerman admitted it. It's taken too much time. We all know it's taken a little bit of time. Well, let's see what happens the next 3 games. Let's see what happens for the rest of the season because this is going to be very interesting to see what happens moving forward because, he's not signed to just 1 year. He signed to a couple years. He signed a multi-year deal, Todd McLellan did. So we're going to see what's going to go on moving forward. So stay tuned to JC Sports YouTube page for more Detroit Red Wings content as we go forward throughout the rest of the Red Wings season. And we'll see you in the next video as we talk more Red Wings hockey here on the Red Alert Podcast and JC Sports YouTube.